Part 1. The Wedding Dress in the Attic. Emily Carter had never believed in ghosts. She was a practical girl, a fashion design student in her final year, analytical, organized, and completely grounded in reality. So when her grandmother passed away and left her an old countryside house near Sussex, she saw it not as an eerie gift, but as an opportunity, a quiet place to work on her final project. The house was large and Victorian, all peeling white paint, ivy-covered chimneys, and rooms soaked in the smell of dust and forgotten perfume. It had been in the family for generations. Her grandmother had lived alone there for the last 30 years. No one in the family ever really spoke of what happened before that. The first few days were uneventful. Emily cleaned, set up a workstation in the sunroom, and explored the house room by room. It wasn't until the fourth evening, when rain lashed against the windows and the power flickered, that she noticed the attic door. It wasn't hidden exactly, but something about it had always escaped her attention. Now, in the dim candlelight, the narrow stairs looked like they descended into another world. She climbed up with a flashlight and found herself in a room full of ancient furniture draped in white cloths. Dust danced in the beam of her light. Mothballs and mildew hung thick in the air. And then, in the far corner, she saw the trunk. It was an old cedar chest with ornate metal handles. Carved into the lid was a barely legible inscription, M. Whitmore, 1923. Emily hesitated only for a moment before opening it. Inside, beneath yellow tissue paper, lay the most beautiful wedding dress she had ever seen. Lace handmade with floral detail, a long flowing veil, and a train that shimmered faintly even in the low light. It was a designer's dream, vintage, untouched, ethereal. She pulled it out carefully and held it up. The fabric was cold, colder than it should have been. Still, Emily was enchanted. She brought it downstairs and hung it in her bedroom to sketch later. She didn't notice that her mirror across the room fogged up, though the room was warm. That night she dreamed of a woman standing at a mirror, adjusting her veil. Her face was hidden, but she was humming something, a low, haunting melody. When she turned to look at Emily, her face was pale and sunken, her mouth stretched in a sorrowful smile. Emily woke with a gasp. She was standing in front of her mirror, hand outstretched, still half asleep. The dress swayed gently on its hanger beside her. She shook it off. "Too many horror movies," she muttered. The next few days were filled with strange occurrences. Doors that she had closed would creak open. The radio turned on by itself, always tuned to static. Emily started having trouble sleeping. Each night, the dream would return. The same woman, closer each time. One morning, Emily found the dress had moved. It was no longer on the hanger, but laid out neatly on her bed, as if someone had carefully placed it there. She called her best friend, Claire, half laughing, half concerned. "Maybe I'm just stressing out," Emily said, "but I feel like this dress is, I don't know, watching me." "That's what you get for living alone in a creepy old house," Claire replied. "Want me to come visit?" "Maybe later. I just need to focus." Curiosity soon took over fear. Emily researched the name embroidered on the trunk, Margaret Whitmore. After hours combing through Old Town records and newspaper archives, she found it. Tragedy at the Whitmore estate. Bride found dead on wedding night. March 14, 1923. Margaret Whitmore, 24, was found dead in her bridal suite late Saturday night. The cause of death remains unknown. Her fiancé, Jonathan Blake, has not been seen since the evening of the wedding and is presumed missing. No foul play has been officially determined, but authorities continue to investigate the mysterious circumstances surrounding the failed union. Emily stared at the screen. Her bedroom, the suite Margaret had died in, suddenly felt colder. That night, thunder cracked through the sky. Emily couldn't sleep. The rain beat against the windows like fingers tapping. Around 2 a.m., she heard it. Soft footsteps above her. The attic. She crept upstairs with a flashlight and pushed open the trapdoor. There, standing at the window, was the figure of a woman in a wedding dress, veil covering her face, body motionless. Emily screamed, dropping the flashlight. The room went black. When she flicked the light back on, the figure was gone. Only the smell of old roses lingered. Emily tried to leave the next day. She packed her things, shoved the dress into a garbage bag, and drove out toward the city. But 20 minutes into the drive, her car broke down without warning. Smoke hissed from under the hood. When the tow truck arrived, the mechanic found nothing wrong. "Car's fine," he said. "It's like it just stopped." Defeated, Emily returned home. When she opened the door, the dress was hanging back in her room, spotless, unwrinkled, and freshly pressed, waiting. She turned to local historian Dr. Peter Hammond, a quiet man in his 50s who specialized in regional legends. She showed him the articles, the dress, and the dreams. Peter's expression grew grim. "They say Margaret never truly left, that she died of heartbreak or betrayal. Some say Jonathan ran off. Others claim he was murdered by her own family. But one thing's always the same. She never got her wedding." He looked at the dress. That gown was never worn to a wedding. It was worn to a funeral. Emily began documenting everything. The dreams, the footsteps, the whispers in the night, the mirrors fogging up, the cold touch on her shoulder, and always Margaret. Closer, watching. One night, Emily found a note tucked into the dress's hem. Faded ink, barely legible. "If he will not finish the vow, another must. A bride must be wed." The air in the room turned bitter. Her breath came out in mist. And behind her in the mirror stood Margaret, closer than ever, lifting the veil, revealing hollow eyes and a bleeding mouth. Emily turned, screaming. But the room was empty. She didn't sleep after that. Instead, she dug further into the past. Peter helped her locate Jonathan Blake's last known residence. They found his journal hidden in a sealed crawl space behind a fireplace. In it, he wrote about Margaret's sudden changes, her obsession with binding rituals, a diary full of symbols, her claim that she could cheat death if love was true. The last entry simply read, "I can't go through with it. She's not who she was. There's something else inside her now." Jonathan never made it to the altar, but Margaret had prepared a ceremony, one that required only a bride and a vow. Emily stood before the dress. She understood now. Margaret had tried to bring Jonathan into her world through a twisted wedding rite. When he fled, the ritual was incomplete. Now the dress sought a new bride, a replacement, her. And unless she found a way to end it, to truly break the ritual, she feared she would wear that dress not for a wedding, but for her own burial. Part 2. The Groom's Ring and the Unfinished Vow. The house no longer felt like hers. The corners of rooms breathed. The air hung with whispers, always too faint to catch but too present to ignore. The wedding dress never moved now, but it didn't need to. Its mere presence dominated the space like a phantom queen on a crooked throne. Emily Carter hadn't slept in days. Not really. Her dreams were so vivid, so visceral, that she feared closing her eyes. Each night, she found herself standing in the same ruined chapel, candlelight flickering around her, Margaret Whitmore in the distance whispering, "Finish what I couldn't." The words clung to her like perfume from a long-dead lover. It was Peter Hammond who first suggested that there had to be more than just the dress. If this is a ritual, and I do believe it is, then the dress is only one piece. Most wedding rites require multiple artifacts, symbols of the bride, the groom, the vow. Emily hesitated before telling him the rest. The whispers, the mirror visions, the note in the hem of the gown. He nodded solemnly. A vow unfulfilled becomes a curse. If Margaret tried to bind Jonathan in death and he fled, the magic would seek balance. Emily's voice cracked. "And now it wants me to replace her?" Peter didn't answer directly. Instead, he said, "We need to find the groom's ring." The fireplace in the study had always seemed off. Bricks darker, cooler. It was Peter who suggested she examine it more closely. After hours of careful tapping and prying, Emily found a hollow space behind the mantel. Inside was a small velvet box, scorched at the edges. She opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a heavy gold band engraved with the initials JB and a date, March 13th, 1923. Beneath the ring, folded in quarters and sealed with wax, was a torn page of paper. "Margaret, I vow to stand with you in life and in the shadow beyond, to speak your name in every breath, to bind soul to soul." The rest was missing. Emily stared at the ring. It shimmered faintly, even in the dim light. Something compelled her. She slipped it onto her finger. The room pulsed. Her ears rang. And in the mirror above the fireplace, for just one heartbeat, her reflection wasn't her own. That night, she woke up standing in the hallway, barefoot, whispering words in a voice not her own. Her journal, which she always left closed on her desk, now contained a full page of writing. She didn't remember writing any of it. The handwriting was rigid, masculine. She calls to me again. The veil was supposed to end it, but I see her every night, at the edge of the bed, asking me to say the words. I cannot. I will not. She is not Margaret anymore. Jonathan and Emily began losing time. She'd blink, and hours would pass. The house rearranged itself, books off shelves, lights on she hadn't touched. One morning she woke up wearing the wedding dress. Her hands trembled as she undid the buttons down her back. She never remembered putting it on. The worst part wasn't the dress, it was the ring. She couldn't remove it. She tried everything, soap, oil, even ice. Her skin reddened and blistered, but the band wouldn't budge. She screamed, sobbed, begged. Nothing worked. The ring was now part of her. Desperate, Emily returned to Peter with the box and the vow fragment. He paled when he read it. This is no ordinary vow. These words, they're ritualistic. Occult. The phrasing is older than it looks, like something out of a binding ceremony. This was not just a wedding, it was a pact. Emily's voice was hoarse. And now I'm caught in it. Peter looked at her gravely. The ring bound Jonathan to Margaret, but he fled before completing the vow. Now the ritual seeks resolution, and with you wearing the ring, you've become the vessel for him. Emily's hands shook. So Jonathan's ghost is inside me? Peter hesitated. Maybe not fully, but his essence, his last resistance. He didn't want to go through with it. That might be your only hope. Over the following nights, Jonathan's presence grew stronger. Emily would black out and find herself writing in old-fashioned cursive. She spoke in a man's voice while asleep. Claire, her best friend, visited and caught her humming a 1920s wedding tune in the middle of the night while staring blankly at the wall. Claire demanded answers. Emily tried to explain everything. She showed her the dress, the ring, the vow, the journal entries. Claire didn't laugh. She didn't run. She believed. I'm staying, Claire said firmly. I'm not letting some vengeful ghost bride possess my best friend. Together, they dove into local archives. They discovered Margaret had once studied with a woman named Evelyn Rook, known locally as a spiritualist and medium. Evelyn died mysteriously days after Margaret's wedding. One of her final writings, found in a dusty tome at the local library, included a disturbing passage. To bind two souls in death requires more than mutual love. One must consent. One must seal. If the seal is broken, the bride shall wait endlessly for completion. Claire looked up. You're the seal now. Emily nodded grimly. And she's going to try and finish the ritual, with or without my consent. Then came the wedding invitation. It appeared one morning on Emily's nightstand, a delicate envelope with golden script. Inside, on aged parchment, read, You are cordially invited to the wedding of Margaret Whitmore and Jonathan Blake. Location, Whitmore Chapel, date March 13th, midnight. Claire's hands shook. That's tonight. Peter met them that evening, carrying a worn leather satchel filled with ritual tools, salt, candles, holy water, iron nails, a mirror blessed by a friar, and Evelyn Rook's writings. The only way to end this is to interrupt the ritual at its core, he said. You have to stand in the ceremony, but resist the vow. And if it comes to it, destroy the bond. Emily nodded. How? Peter pulled out a silver knife. This, dipped in ash and oil, if you pierce the heart of the dress with it before the final vow is spoken, the spell should break. Emily's eyes hardened. Then let's finish this. They drove in silence through winding roads, the moon pale above the treetops. At the edge of the forest stood Whitmore Chapel, ruined, half swallowed by ivy, stone-cracked and bleeding moss. Inside, candles flickered, though no one had lit them. Flowers long dead lined the pews. The organ played itself. At the altar stood Margaret. She was beautiful and rotting, a glowing bride with hollow eyes and blood-stained lace, her smile stretched too wide, teeth too white. Emily stepped forward, wearing the wedding dress. The ring on her finger pulsed with heat. Margaret's voice echoed, You came. Emily nodded. I'm ready. Behind her, Peter and Claire lit protective circles of salt. The ceremony began. The chapel shimmered, suddenly restored, walls clean, stained glass glowing. The air grew thick with incense. A ghostly priest emerged from the shadows. He turned to Emily. Do you take this soul, abandoned and betrayed, to bind with yours for all eternity? Margaret whispered. Say yes. Emily hesitated. The ring burned. A second voice whispered from inside her, Jonathan's voice. Don't say it. She'll take everything. Emily clenched her fists. Her mouth trembled. She took a deep breath and said, "No." The illusion shattered. The chapel cracked. Margaret screamed, a howl of rage and agony that shook the floor. Her body twisted, face melting into a skull, dress blackening. "You dare refuse me again?" She lunged. Claire screamed. Peter threw the mirror, shattering it between them. The ghost recoiled, shrieking. Emily seized the silver knife. With one final breath, she plunged it into the heart of the dress, the bodice just below her chest. The dress erupted in flames. The ring cracked. Margaret shrieked, a sound of final death, and vanished in a storm of ash and red petals. Emily collapsed. The air cleared. The chapel returned to ruin. Peter knelt beside her, checking her pulse. Claire wept, gripping her hand. The dress was gone. The ring had shattered to dust. Emily's body was hers again. In the weeks that followed, the house quieted. The mirror no longer reflected shadows. The cold vanished. The dreams stopped. Peter took the remnants of the ritual to bury them in consecrated ground. Claire helped Emily move back to the city. They never spoke of the chapel again. But sometimes in her sketchbook, Emily still found drawings she didn't remember making. Veiled figures, wilted bouquets, a chapel made of bone. And once, just once, she found a final note written in looping handwriting. "You broke the vow, but a bride still waits." Part 3, The Dead Person's Wedding. A month had passed. Emily Carter had returned to the city, but peace remained elusive. The wedding dress was gone, the ring destroyed, and Margaret Whitmore, the vengeful bride, had vanished in fire and ash. Yet something still lingered. Whispers sometimes followed her into sleep. Mirrors reflected flickers of movement. The air in her apartment often smelled faintly of roses. And worst of all, the dreams returned. Not every night, but enough to make her dread the darkness. She would find herself walking through a candlelit hall, led by invisible hands toward an altar. But the chapel was no longer ruined. It was grand, alive, humming with voices. And at the end of the aisle stood Margaret. Not dead, not decayed, but radiant and waiting. Claire noticed the change in her friend. "You're still not free," she said softly over tea one evening. "You think destroying the dress and the ring ended it, but that was only part of it." Emily stirred her tea without drinking. "I feel like something's unfinished, like Margaret's waiting for a new wedding, one she can finish." Claire leaned in. "Then maybe that's exactly what she's doing, creating a new version of the ritual. You stopped the one meant for Jonathan. Now she's adapting. Maybe this time she wants you to marry her." Emily froze. "What?" "You said it yourself. The invitation had your name. You were the vessel. The bride was just a mask for something else. If she can't bind Jonathan, maybe she's trying to complete the rite with you." Emily's heart sank. A dead person's wedding, with me as the groom. The confirmation came the next night. Emily awoke to find a veil draped across her dresser. A pale, sheer veil, but this time stitched with her initials in lace, EC. Beneath it lay another invitation. "Final ceremony, midnight, March 14th. All shall attend. Location, Whitmore House." Where it all began. Claire stared at it, expression blank. "That's tomorrow." Emily could hardly breathe. "What happens if I don't go?" "I think you will go, whether you mean to or not." They called Peter. He didn't answer. So they drove out to Whitmore House at sunset. The property, once foreboding, now stood impossibly still. The trees were motionless. The air had weight. Crows perched silently along the fence, not cawing, just watching. Inside, everything was pristine. Furniture polished, candles lit. The kitchen smelled of rosewater and old wine. The house had prepared itself. "It's like she's hosting," Claire whispered. On the dining table, a single piece of paper. "Attire will be provided." The moment Emily entered her bedroom, she knew it was too late to leave. The dress was there again. Not the one from before, but a new creation. Black lace, blood-red lining, and a veil like cobwebs. It called to her. And despite every instinct screaming not to, her hands moved without will, buttoning the dress, lacing the back, fitting the veil. Claire knocked on the door, then gasped, "Emily!" Her voice trembled. "It's not me." Peter arrived just before midnight, pale and breathless. "I came as fast as I could," he said. "I found something in Evelyn Rook's final journal, a final entry torn from the book. It speaks of the third stage of the binding, the ceremony of completion." Claire read aloud. If the original pair fails, the binding will find a substitute. When the blood of the bride and groom intertwine, and the vow is spoken freely, the dead shall walk again. Peter looked at Emily. She wants to complete the binding, with you as the other half. This time, she isn't just seeking love, she's seeking rebirth. Claire turned to Peter, panicked. Then how do we stop it? We don't let her finish the vow. At the stroke of midnight, the house changed. The lights flickered, and shadows rippled across the walls like waves. The floorboards hummed with unseen footsteps. The temperature dropped, breath turned to fog. And then bells, faint, mournful wedding bells. The living room transformed into a Gothic chapel. Pews materialized, candles hovered midair. A spectral crowd sat in silence, translucent figures from different eras, faces blurred by time. Among them in the front row sat Margaret's parents, pale, grieving, unmoving. At the altar stood Margaret, alive, glowing, terrifyingly beautiful, in a black dress identical to Emily's, veil drawn, bouquet of black roses in hand. The priest, the same phantom from the chapel, raised his arms. Let the final union begin. Emily was pulled forward by invisible hands. She stood across from Margaret, their matching gowns like mirror images. The room pulsed with ancient energy. The priest intoned, "Do you, Emily Carter, bind yourself willingly to Margaret Whitmore, in death as in life?" Margaret lifted her veil. Her eyes were red, crying blood, smiling. Emily felt the words clawing at her throat, a compulsion to say, "I do." But then she heard it, Claire's voice somewhere behind her screaming, "Don't speak, Emily, fight!" Peter hurled a salt sigil into the center aisle. The floor cracked. Margaret hissed. "I waited a century," she shrieked. "You will not deny me again." The spirits in the pews screamed, their mouths opening impossibly wide. The candles exploded in black flame. Emily ripped the veil from her face and stepped back. "No," she said. "This isn't love. This is possession." Margaret's face twisted. "We are the same now." "You are nothing like me," Emily spat. "You died full of rage, and now you want to drag others down with you." Margaret lunged. The world shattered into black. Emily found herself in a void, floating in the ruined chapel again, candles swirling around her like fireflies. Across from her, Margaret floated, her form flickering between beauty and rot. "You wear the dress," Margaret hissed. "You carry the ring. The vow must be finished." "No," Emily said. "You never loved Jonathan. You tried to own him." Margaret's form screamed, face melting, bones stretching. "You're not a bride," Emily whispered. "You're a prison." In that moment, Emily felt the power shift. She reached into her chest, not physically, but in the dreamscape, and pulled forth the shattered ring. It had reformed in this place, glowing white. She threw it. It struck Margaret's heart. A scream unlike anything earthly tore through the void. Light erupted. Emily woke on the floor of the living room. The pews were gone. The candles were extinguished. Claire knelt beside her, sobbing. Peter leaned against the wall, exhausted. The air was clear. The house was still. They searched the house from attic to cellar. The dress was gone. The veil had turned to ash. The mirrors now reflected only the living. Margaret Whitmore had been laid to rest, not in love, but in truth. A week later, Emily held a quiet memorial in the Whitmore family graveyard. She placed black roses on Margaret's tombstone and whispered, "I hope you finally found peace." As she turned to leave, a breeze swept the petals away. Back in the city, Emily returned to her design school. Her final project, a line of wedding gowns inspired by 1920 styles, soft, romantic, and tinged with Gothic beauty. She named the line Vows Unspoken. It won first prize. But sometimes late at night, she still dreams of Margaret. Only now she's standing in a field of roses, silent, serene, and watching, still waiting. The end.